He said I was nothing without him. My coffee went cold before my tears did. That's the day I started buying his building. My name's Helen. I'm 45 years old. And this is the story of how silence became my revenge. When I met Daryl, I thought I'd met a man who saw me. Not the corporate version of me, not the church on Sunday version, but me. The girl who used to dream in library corners, who saved every paycheck to buy her mama a second-hand washer. He was smooth back then, laughed with his whole chest, called me my future CEO, used to say I walked like I owned the ground. Funny thing about men who call you queen. Sometimes they just mean they want to own the castle. The morning it all cracked, he stood in the doorway of our kitchen, arms folded. That crooked smirk I used to think was confidence now just looked like control. "You really think you can run that department?" he said, chewing on his toast like my promotion was an inconvenience. "Daryl," I said, "I've been working for that for 6 years." He shrugged. "You get too emotional. Management ain't for feelings." I looked down at the mug between my hands. World's Best Wife. He bought it. Years ago. Probably as a joke. My silence made him nervous, so he filled it. "I'm just being real with you. You need me. You wouldn't last a month without this house. My insurance, I cut him off. Finish that sentence. He didn't. 2 weeks later, the company called. Promotion denied. Internal restructuring, they said. But I knew who'd whispered. My loving husband was drinking beers with my manager on weekends. He called it networking. I cried in the bathroom that night. Quiet, ugly tears that you don't post about. He walked by, smirked again, and said, "Told you, you're too emotional." Then he left to meet the boys. That was the night I started writing everything down. Dates, times, bank statements, texts he thought I'd never see. You see, emotion doesn't mean weak. It means watching everything. "Girl, you still with that man?" My friend Keisha asked one Sunday after service. "For now," I said. She looked at me like she already knew the storm was coming. "Don't let him dim you, Helen. You built yourself before he even showed up." Her words stayed with me. I started saving again, quietly. Every freelance design gig, every after-hours project the office didn't pay enough for, every consulting favor I did for small startups. I opened a separate account. I didn't plan on revenge. I planned on freedom. But freedom and revenge? Sometimes they share the same road. Months passed. Daryl got louder, meaner. He liked reminding me what he paid for. This roof, this light bill, this car. One night I asked him, "You happy?" He said, "I'm comfortable. You should try it sometime." Comfort is poison when you've got ambition. I remember the first real crack. He came home late smelling like another woman's perfume, the kind that costs more than mine. "You smell nice," I said, pouring his drink. He froze. "It's from the bar." "Mm-hmm." He watched me, waiting for the fight. But I smiled, kissed his cheek, and said, "You hungry?" That smile scared him more than any scream could have, because silence? That's strategy. For 6 months I said nothing. I just worked. Built my little side hustle until it started pulling in numbers. Real ones. I invested in myself, took an online finance course, learned how to move quiet. Daryl kept thinking he was the boss. I was already building my company behind his back, registered under my maiden name. When he'd mock me, "How's your little hobby, Helen?" I'd smile. Growing. Then came the day he lost his job. Budget cuts. The man who said I'd be nothing without him was now sitting at my kitchen table filling out unemployment forms. "Guess we're both out of luck," he mumbled. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just poured him coffee. Same mug. World's Best Wife. He didn't notice the logo on my laptop, Helen Price Consulting LLC. Weeks later, my first big client came through, a real estate firm that needed digital branding. They wired the deposit directly into my new business account, $50,000. I stared at the number until tears blurred it. That night, Daryl came in bragging about a potential lead. A buddy at the same firm was looking for someone to design marketing materials for their new office spaces. I said, "What's the firm's name?" He told me. I smiled. "Oh," I said, "I might know them." He laughed. "Sure, babe. Let the professionals handle it." 3 weeks later, the contract came back. They wanted to hire my firm for permanent retainer services. 6 figures. And the cherry on top? The firm's main property was managed by Daryl's new boss. I didn't plan it. Not like this. But when you move in silence, fate starts organizing your receipts. I showed up at the office for our first in-person meeting, heels clicking on the marble floor. The receptionist looked up. "You must be Ms. Price." I smiled. "Yes, the owner." From the corner of my eye, I saw him, Daryl, carrying coffee trays, folders tucked under his arm, wearing that same smirk he used to use on me. He froze mid-step. Helen?" I turned slow, deliberate. "Morning," I said. "You must be with maintenance?" The room went quiet. He stammered. I work here, marketing division." "Oh, perfect," I said. "We'll be working closely." That meeting lasted an hour. I didn't look at him once. When the manager introduced me as our new consulting partner, I just nodded. Afterward, Daryl followed me into the hallway. "What the hell, Helen?" "What? You set this up?" "No," I said. "You did. Remember when you told me I was too emotional for management? Turns out emotions make good strategy." He blinked. I walked away. Weeks turned into months. My firm grew, faster than I could have imagined. Clients referred clients. And Daryl? He had to sign off on every invoice that crossed his department, including mine, my company, my name. Every paycheck that left his desk went through me, and every time he signed that approval line, he was paying me. The night he realized it, really realized it, he showed up at my place. We'd been separated by then. He wanted to talk. He stood in the doorway, the same way he did years ago, only this time I didn't flinch. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Thank you." He shifted. "You really bought into that firm, huh?" I smiled. "No, Daryl, I bought your building." He laughed, nervous. "You're lying." I handed him the papers. Title deed. Ownership signed. His face drained. "You'll never forgive me, will you?" he said finally. "I already did," I said. "That's why you don't scare me anymore." He looked around, desperate for control. "You think this makes you better?" "No," I said softly. "It just makes me free." That night, I sat by the window with a glass of wine. The city hummed, cars, rain, life moving forward. I thought about the years I wasted waiting for his approval. Now I had something better. Proof. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a direct deposit. I didn't quit my job right away. No. Quitting would have made him feel right. Instead, I stayed, played the long game, and let the numbers talk for me. See, power doesn't come from yelling. It comes from knowing something they don't. So while Daryl was out most nights networking, I was building a different kind of empire. He used to think I was scrolling recipes. I was studying real estate law, online business credit, and tax loopholes. One night, he stumbled in around midnight, reeking of whiskey and arrogance. He tossed his keys on the counter and said, "What you still doing up?" I didn't even look up from my screen. "Learning." He laughed. "Learning what? Pinterest crafts?" I turned my laptop so the light hit his face. "Business law." He smirked. "What you need that for?" "To make sure the next person who underestimates me signs the wrong contract." He blinked. "You talking about me?" I smiled. "Not yet." He went quiet after that, for a while. That's how men like him react when they sense change but can't name it. They get restless, suspicious, small. He started picking fights over nothing. Cold dinner, unpaid bill, me wearing red lipstick to church. One night he said, "You dressing like you single?" I said, "Maybe I'm dressing like I remember who I am." He didn't have a comeback for that. At work, I was still overlooked. Meetings I led but didn't get credit for. Presentations he called too emotional. But something was shifting. My side business was taking clients from the same firms my company courted. I started using what I learned at work, not for them, but for me. Every email I sent, I copied the structure from my templates. Every deal I watched fall apart, I learned what not to do. By the time the quarter ended, my little hobby made more than my paycheck, and I hadn't even told a soul. Then one morning, I woke up to an email that changed everything. A startup from Atlanta wanted me to redesign their full digital identity. From brand to website to PR strategy, they found my portfolio online. I didn't even know it was ranking that high. When I opened the contract, I saw the signature line, $85,000. I took a deep breath, texted Keisha, "Lunch on me today, big news." She replied with a gif of Oprah throwing money. At lunch, she leaned across the table. "Girl, tell me." I showed her the contract. She gasped so loud the waitress smiled. "Helen, that's God." I laughed. "No, that's grind." She nodded. "Same thing sometimes." I wanted to celebrate, but I also wanted to keep quiet. Because Daryl had started checking my mail, my drawers, even my browser history. He wasn't stupid. He just wasn't smart enough to know how careful I'd become. He asked one night, "You seeing someone?" "No." "You hiding money?" "Maybe." He glared. "You think this funny?" "No," I said softly. "I think it's tragic." That shut him up. By then, I'd already filed for a separate business line of credit, $25,000 under my maiden name. The day the approval came through, I looked at the email like it was freedom in a PDF. Daryl thought I was watching YouTube. He had no idea I was building his replacement. Around that time, the company that denied me the promotion posted the position again. Same title, same salary, different name on the shortlist. Daryl Matthews. Yes, my own husband. The man who told me I was too emotional for management. He didn't even tell me he applied. I found out when my boss mentioned it in passing. I smiled through the meeting, but inside, something clicked. If he wanted to compete, he'd just entered my playground. The next week, I walked into HR and submitted my resignation. The same HR rep who told me I wasn't a good fit for leadership tried to talk me out of it. "Why now?" she asked. I smiled. "Because I'm not quitting. I'm graduating." At home, I cooked his favorite dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes. He walked in, smelled it, and said, "What's the occasion?" "I quit today," I said. He froze. "You what?" "I resigned. Going full-time with my company." He laughed hard. "You? Full-time? You don't even have a real office." "Not yet," I said, but the lease starts next month." His face twitched. "With what money?" "Mine." Silence. He shook his head. "You'll be begging for this roof in 6 months." I smiled. "I'll own one by then." He slept in the guest room that night. I slept like a baby. The first month of independence was terrifying. No steady paycheck, no health insurance, just me, my laptop, and faith. But the fear made me sharper. Hustle replaced hesitation. By month 3, my business had doubled its revenue. By month 6, I hired Keisha part-time. By month 9, I paid off our joint credit card in full, just to close it in front of him. He said, "You trying to prove something?" I said, "Already did." Then came the phone call that turned revenge into poetry. A commercial real estate agent called about a small office complex up for sale, the same one that housed Daryl's company. I nearly dropped my phone. "How much?" I asked. She gave me the number. High, but not impossible. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing his face, that smirk in the kitchen, the "you need me" speech. I whispered to myself, "Not anymore." I called my banker the next morning, pulled business credit, personal savings, and investment returns. It was just enough for a down payment. I signed the paperwork 2 weeks later. The same week, Daryl's company renewed their lease. He had no idea who the new landlord was. The first rent payment came through electronically. I checked the account and saw the memo. Payment to Price Holdings, LLC. My hands shook. I wasn't crying. It was too satisfying for that. I was processing. That night, I printed the confirmation, framed it, and hung it in my new office, right above my desk. Underneath it, I taped a sticky note. He said I'd be nothing without him. A few days later, Daryl called. "You hear about the new owner?" he asked. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. "Can't say I have." "Some woman out of nowhere, crazy." "Yeah," I said. "Sounds like she's smart." He chuckled. "We'll see." We always do. He found out 3 months later, at a company mixer. I showed up in a white suit and heels sharp enough to slice silence. The CEO introduced me with a smile. "This is Helen Price, owner of the property and managing consultant for our next rebrand." You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Daryl's glass froze mid-air. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, I had the silence. And the power. I leaned over and said quietly, "Now you work for me." He looked down, humiliated. I raised my glass. To emotions. That night, he texted, "We should talk." I didn't respond, because revenge doesn't need a conversation. It needs closure. I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and watched the city lights flicker. I thought about all the times I bit my tongue to keep Horty the peace. All the nights I believed his words more than my worth. And I smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace. Because sometimes God lets the people who broke you deliver your blessings. After that night, Daryl tried to play the humble card. It's funny how men rewrite history when the power shifts. He started sending texts. "Proud of you." Didn't mean what I said back then. "Maybe we could grab dinner." I didn't respond to any of them. See, he thought I was still the same woman who needed his validation. But once you learn how to breathe without someone, you stop craving their oxygen. A week later, I saw him at the building, head down, trying not to make eye contact as I walked through the lobby. I wasn't cruel. I smiled. "Morning, Daryl." He mumbled, "Morning, Miss Price." Miss Price. That title sounded better than wife ever did. My assistant Keisha walked beside me carrying files. "You really gonna let him call you that?" I grinned. "It's appropriate. He works for me now." She laughed so hard she almost dropped the folders. "Girl, you are living every woman's dream." "No," I said. "I'm living my peace." Inside my office, sunlight hit the framed rent receipts lined along my wall, the ones signed by him. Every month, like clockwork, a new piece of poetic justice arrived right into my account. But even that didn't feel like victory anymore. Revenge has a shelf life. After the heat fades, what's left is clarity. I started mentoring other women, quietly, single moms trying to start businesses, young professionals stuck in offices where they were too much or not enough. I told them what I wish someone told me. They can't cancel your calling. They can only delay it. One afternoon, I was finishing a strategy meeting when Keisha buzzed my line. "Girl," she whispered, "your ex is downstairs." I exhaled. "Send him up." He came in with a manila envelope, nervous energy all over him. "Before you say anything," he started, "I just want to make peace." "Peace?" I repeated. "That's new." He looked around my office. The leather chairs, the awards, the plaque with my name etched in gold. "You did good," he said quietly. "I did better than good," I replied. He nodded. "You always were smart. I just didn't believe I'd get here?" He swallowed. "Didn't believe I'd lose everything and still have to face you like this." Silence. That's what honesty sounds like when it finally grows up. I leaned back. "So, what's in the envelope?" He pushed it across the table. "Divorce papers. Finalized." I picked it up. Thick, heavy. I didn't even open it. "You could have mailed these." "I owed you face to face." "Then say it," I said. "Whatever you came here to say." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't mean to kill your confidence." "You didn't," I said softly. You just buried it long enough for me to dig up something stronger." He smiled, sad, tired. "You always had a way with words. That's what happens when you stop defending yourself and start defining yourself." He stood up to leave. "I'll be out of your hair. Guess you won't have to see me anymore." I smiled. "Oh, I'll still see you. Rent's due on the 1st. He laughed, a real one this time, the kind that carried no power, just regret. Then he left. When the door closed, I looked at the papers in my hand. 12 years, reduced to signatures and court stamps. I should have felt sad, but instead I felt complete. Because that paper didn't end us. It confirmed what was already dead. That night, I drove to the old neighborhood, the one where we first met. Same diner, same parking lot. The waitress, same woman, older now, recognized me. "Well, look at you, baby. You on TV or something?" "Not yet," I said with a laugh. I sat at our old booth, looked out at the flickering streetlight. Back then, he'd told me, "You're the calm before my storm." He didn't realize I was the lightning. When I got home, there was a message waiting in my inbox from a production company. They'd seen my business feature in Women in Business Weekly. They wanted to interview me for a documentary on female entrepreneurs who rebuilt after betrayal. I stared at the email. Ain't it funny? The same pain that almost broke me was now the reason cameras wanted to hear my voice. I said yes. The next few weeks were a blur of microphones, makeup, and memories. They filmed in my office, my house, even the lobby where Daryl used to walk past me like I was invisible. Now they were adjusting lights to capture my best angle. One of the producers asked, "What was your turning point?" I smiled, when I stopped needing him to believe in me more than I believed in myself. The crew went silent. You could feel the goosebumps in the room. After the documentary aired, everything exploded. Clients doubled. My email filled up with women saying things like, "You told my story, and I'm finally leaving him." Some said, "You gave me permission to dream again." That hit me hard, because I never wanted fame. I just wanted peace. But if my peace gave someone else a roadmap, then it was worth every tear I'd swallowed. A month later, I was invited to speak at a women's conference in Atlanta. Keisha came with me. She'd become my right hand by then. We were backstage when she looked at me and said, "You ready?" I said, "I was born ready. I just forgot for a while." When I stepped onto that stage, the lights were so bright I couldn't see faces, just shadows and applause. I took a deep breath and said, 3 years ago, my husband told me I'd be nothing without him. Today, my name's on his paycheck." The crowd roared. Told them everything, the pain, the doubt, the nights of pretending I was okay when I wasn't. But I also told them the truth no one says out loud. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strategy. It clears the path so you can build without bitterness. By the time I finished, people were crying, not because of the story, but because they saw themselves in it. Afterward, a young woman approached me, maybe mid-20s, trembling. She said, "Ms. Helen, my boyfriend says the same things yours did, that I won't make it without him." I touched her hand. "Then make sure your success has his silence in it." She smiled through tears. That's when I realized my revenge wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who ever dimmed her light to keep someone else comfortable. That night, after the flight home, I sat on my balcony watching the city again. The air smelled like rain and second chances. My phone buzzed. An email notification. Subject, position opening, Director of Marketing. Sender, Daryl's old boss. The message said, "We're expanding. Would love to discuss partnership opportunities with your firm." I laughed out loud. Partnership. The same word Daryl used to throw around when he wanted control. I typed back, "I don't do partnerships. I do ownerships." Then I closed my laptop. The next morning, Keisha brought coffee and said, "Girl, you glowing." "I slept good," I said. "Dream about him?" "No," I said. "Dreamed about what's next." She smiled. That's the difference between moving on and leveling up. Weeks later, I walked through that same lobby again, only this time it wasn't for business, it was for closure. Daryl was in the break room microwaving something sad. He looked up. Helen. Daryl. You came to collect rent? I smiled. No, I came to say thank you. He frowned. For what? For underestimating me. If you hadn't, I'd still be trying to prove something. He nodded slowly. Guess we both learned. Guess we did. I turned to leave and he said softly, You really happy? I paused. Happier than I've ever been. Then I walked away. Heels clicking like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence, I finally finished writing. After that final conversation with Daryl, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pride either. I just felt still, like my life had finally exhaled. The noise was gone. The constant explaining, defending, negotiating, gone. And for the first time in years, the sound of my own thoughts didn't scare me. I started doing something new every morning. Silence before sunrise. No phone, no news, just coffee, gospel jazz, and gratitude. Because peace, I learned, doesn't show up like lightning. It creeps in like light, slow and certain. I made a rule. Before I touch my laptop, I say 3 things I'm grateful for. Some days it's simple. Hot coffee, clean sheets, no Daryl. Other days it's deeper. My voice, my peace, my purpose. And it worked. Every blessing I spoke started multiplying. Business was booming, but more than that, I was becoming someone I actually liked. Clients called not just for contracts, they called for advice. I was mentoring women in cities I'd never been to, and every time I shared my story, it felt less like revenge, more like testimony. Keisha said one day, You know, Auntie Helen, you becoming like them women in the books, the ones folks quote when they tired of being quiet. I laughed. I don't want to be quoted. I just want to be useful. She smiled. Well, you both. Then something unexpected happened. A letter came. A handwritten envelope, old school cursive, return address, Matthews Daryl. I sat there for a good 10 minutes before opening it. Inside was one line. I'm sorry, for real this time. No excuses, no manipulation, just a signature and a folded check. Half the refund from our old joint account I'd forgotten existed. It wasn't about the money, it was the humility I never thought I'd see from him. And for the first time, I didn't feel that fire in my chest, just release. That night, I went through my old journals, the ones filled with pain, planning, and prayers. One page stopped me. When I own the building, I'll forgive him. I smiled. Guess that time came. I tore the page out, burned it over the kitchen sink, and whispered, I forgive you, Daryl. I forgive me too. The smoke curled like freedom. A week later, I got a call from the same documentary producer. Ms. Price, your segment went viral. You had 3 million views. Would you consider a full series? Maybe Women Who Rose? I nearly dropped the phone. Series? Yes, ma'am. Streaming network interest. You'd host. I laughed. You sure they want me? I'm not Hollywood. He said, That's why they want you. You're real. I said yes. They flew me out to New York for meetings. Keisha came too, of course. She'd earned that seat next to me. When the plane lifted off, she squeezed my hand. From crying in bathrooms to flying first class. Look at God. Look at growth, I said, smiling. When we landed, the city lights below looked like everything I used to pray for. Proof that miracles can start in messy kitchens. The next morning, we sat in a glass-walled conference room surrounded by executives in sharp suits. They pitched me the show format. Each episode would follow a woman rebuilding her life after betrayal. I'd narrate, mentor, and close every story with reflection. Basically, Aunt Helen, the testimony series. I paused. Can I tell it in my voice? The way I talk? Not the TV version? The producer smiled. That's the only reason we called you. A few months later, we shot the pilot episode in Atlanta. The cameras rolled, the lights glowed, and I walked on set wearing my grandmother's cross. the one she gave me when I was 16. The crew quieted. I looked into the lens and said, "This ain't about revenge anymore. It's about resurrection." That became the tagline of the whole series. While filming, something wild happened. A familiar name popped up on my phone during lunch, Daryl Matthews. For a second, I almost ignored it, but something in me said, "Answer." "Hello?" He hesitated. "Didn't think you'd pick up." "I almost didn't," he chuckled softly. "You look good on TV." "Appreciate it." Pause. "I've been working on myself," he said. "Good," I replied. "I started therapy, figured it was time to stop blaming and start facing." I smiled faintly. "That's growth." He exhaled. "Guess you were my wake-up call." "I wasn't your wake-up call, Daryl. Life was. I just rang the bell." After that, we spoke once or twice more. Civil, distant, human. He was learning, and I respected that. Sometimes closure isn't revenge. It's recognition. When the series launched, it broke records. Women everywhere shared their stories under the hashtag "worrying nothing without me," a flipped version of his old insult. It trended for weeks. Posts like, "My boss said I'd never make manager. I just opened my own salon." "My ex said I'd need him forever. My business paid off his car." It was beautiful, like a digital revival. At the season finale party, the room was full of lights, cameras, laughter, and champagne. Keisha handed me a glass. "You realize you started a movement, right?" I grinned. "I started healing. The movement came after." A woman I'd never met approached me, tears in her eyes. She whispered, "Your story saved me." I hugged her. "No, baby, you saved you. I just told mine out loud." When I got home that night, I took off the heels, poured a glass of red wine, and stood at my window again. The city lights twinkled like applause, but this time I didn't need it, because I had something better than validation. Alignment. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Saw the show. You're unstoppable. Proud of you. D." I didn't reply, but I smiled, because for once, those words didn't come from power. They came from peace. A few months later, I visited Mama's grave. I sat beside her headstone with a picnic blanket and told her everything. The pain, the lessons, the show, the peace. "I did it, Mama," I whispered. "You told me I was more than somebody's wife. Took me a while to believe it." The wind picked up, soft and warm, like she was nodding. When I stood to leave, I looked up at the sky. "I'm still emotional," I said, laughing. "Just richer now." That night, I posted one last thing on my channel. To every woman who's been told she's too emotional, too loud, too much, keep being all of it. Because emotion built empires. Because silence bought buildings. And because peace is the loudest revenge of all. The comments flooded in. Hearts, prayers, thank yous. But my favorite was from someone anonymous. "My husband said the same words yours did. Now I'm starting my own business. You gave me the map." I whispered to myself, "Mission accomplished." I used to think revenge was about proving someone wrong. Now I know it's about proving yourself right. By the time the second season of Women Who Rose started filming, I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I was chasing purpose, and purpose has a rhythm, steady, grounded, and unstoppable. It was early spring when I got the email that reminded me just how far I'd come. Subject: speaking invitation. Harvard Business School. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my tea. The same woman who used to cry in her Toyota because her husband called her too emotional for management was now being asked to lecture MBA students about leadership through empathy. God's sense of humor is undefeated. On the flight to Boston, Keisha sat next to me scrolling through her phone. She nudged me. "Auntie Helen, they got your picture on the program cover. You big time now." I smiled. I was big time the moment I stopped begging to be believed. She grinned. "You really gon' make folks cry with that line." "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll remember it." When I stepped on that stage, the room was packed. Professors, executives, students in press suits. I told them my story. Not the TV version, but the real one. The nights of fear, the quiet humiliation, the silent rebuilding. And then I told them the truth. Leadership without empathy is manipulation, and success without peace is poverty. When I finished, the applause didn't feel like noise. It felt like acknowledgement. Afterward, a young man approached me and said, "Miss Price, my mom's been watching your show. She just opened her bakery, said you were her silent partner in courage." I smiled. "Tell her I want a cupcake named after me." Back at the hotel that night, I took off my heels and checked my messages. There was one that caught my eye, from Daryl. "I watched your talk. You sounded like somebody I used to pray you'd become." For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. Not anger, not longing, just gratitude for the journey that made me unreadable to him now. I typed back, "I always was her. You just couldn't see past your own shadow." Then I hit send and went to sleep. The next morning, Keisha burst into my room holding her phone. "Girl, you trending again, but not just the show. That Harvard clip? 2 million views in 12 hours. I rubbed my eyes. "You kidding?" "Nope. They calling you the emotional CEO. I groaned. "Lord, not another nickname." She laughed. "Own it. You turned your insult into a brand." She wasn't wrong. By summer, I was consulting for 3 Fortune 500 companies, not because they needed another strategist, but because they needed soul. One CEO told me, "Your story made my daughter quit her toxic job. I figured if you could inspire her, maybe you could inspire my team." I smiled. "I don't inspire teams. I expose truth. The inspiration comes after." One evening, after a long day of meetings, I stopped by a cafe I used to cry in during my struggle years. Same barista, same smell of caramel and espresso. Only this time I paid with a corporate card that had my name embossed in gold. As I waited for my drink, I heard 2 women whispering behind me. "That's her," one said. "The lady from Women Who Rose. She the one whose husband said she'd be nothing." The other replied, "And now she own his building." I turned, smiled, and said, "Yes, ma'am, and peace pays better than rent." They laughed, clapped, and asked for a photo. That night I sat in my car a long while thinking, not about Daryl, not about revenge, but about what's next. See, once you've rebuilt yourself, you start realizing survival was just the first chapter. The real story is what you do with your strength after. That's when I decided to open the Helen Foundation, a nonprofit to help women transition from survival to stability, funding small business grants, financial literacy workshops, and mental health counseling. When I announced it, donations flooded in. Even corporations wanted to partner, but one check stood out, handwritten, no return address. Amount $10,000. Signature, D. Matthews. I smiled. The universe always balances its books. During the Foundation's first event, I stood on stage with women who had stories like mine. Some worse, some wilder, all powerful. One said, "You made it look easy." I shook my head. "Baby, nothing about it was easy, but it was necessary." Another asked, "Do you ever miss him?" I paused. "No, I just missed the version of me that thought I needed him." The crowd went silent. Then someone started clapping, and it spread like thunder. Months later, on my 47th birthday, Keisha surprised me with something wild. She pulled up in a silver car with a bow on it. "What's this?" I asked. "Your dream car, paid in full by your show's bonus check." I blinked. "You bought it?" She shook her head. "You did. I just wrapped it." I laughed until tears came. "Girl, you trying to make me emotional on purpose." She grinned. "Ain't that your brand?" We drove around the city blasting old-school soul music, windows down, wind in our hair, both of us screaming lyrics like teenagers. Freedom has a sound. And that night, it sounded like laughter. But the most emotional moment came later that week. I got a message from a high school principal in Chicago. He said, "One of our students watched your story in class. She wrote her college essay about you. She got a full scholarship." He attached her essay. First line, "She made me believe my story ain't over just because somebody else stopped believing in me." I cried right there in my office, not out of sadness, but because legacy had snuck up on me. I realized something that night. The best revenge isn't ownership, it's impact. Because property can burn, money can vanish, but the lives you change, they echo. So now, whenever someone calls me lucky, I smile and say, "No, baby, I'm just proof that prayer and paperwork work better together." One evening, while leaving my office, I noticed a familiar figure across the street. Daryl. He waved, not desperate, not entitled, just respectful. I waved back. He crossed over. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I own here, remember?" He smiled. "Old habits." Pause. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For letting me fall. If you'd saved me, I never would have learned." I nodded. "You're welcome." We stood there, quiet for a moment, city traffic humming around us. Then he said, "You really did buy my building." "Yep," he chuckled. "Guess I was right about one thing. You're emotional." "Maybe," I said, "but emotions built this empire." We both laughed, and that was the last time we spoke. I never planned to become a symbol. I just wanted to survive without breaking. But somewhere between heartbreak and healing, I turned into someone people looked up to. And that's the strangest thing about success. You spend years fighting to be seen, then one day, everybody's watching. Season 2 of Women Who Rose hit differently. We told stories from all over the country. Women who'd escaped bad marriages, corrupt bosses, generational curses. The stories were heavy, holy, and healing. But halfway through filming, one of the producers pulled me aside. "Helen, we got an episode pitch," he said. "About what?" He looked down. "About you." I blinked. "I'm already in it." He shook his head. "Not as the host, as the story." For a second, I didn't know what to say. It had been years since that old pain had touched me. But the idea stuck. Maybe it was time to tell the full version, the messy, unfiltered, unpolished truth. I said yes. They brought cameras into my old neighborhood, back to the little house with chipped paint and prayers in the walls. Neighbors peeked out windows whispering, "That's her, Helen from TV." Standing there, looking at the place I used to cry in, I felt something shift. Not sadness, gratitude, because that house wasn't where I fell. It was where I decided not to stay down. Inside, the crew asked me to sit at the old kitchen table, the same table where Daryl once told me I'd be nothing without him. The wood was worn now, faded, but it still held the memory and the victory. They asked me, "If you could speak to that younger version of you, what would you say?" I looked straight into the camera. I'd tell her, "Baby, don't waste your silence on proving them wrong. Use it to build your right." You could hear a pin drop. The episode aired 3 months later, titled "The Building She Bought." It broke the internet. Women tagged me nonstop. Memes, quotes, reaction videos. Someone even made t-shirts that said, "Silence is strategy." Keisha texted, "Girl, you merch now." I laughed. "Guess I'm a brand and a sermon." But with the spotlight came something else. Letters. Hundreds of them. From women, men, even teenagers. One read, "My mom left an abusive marriage because of your story. She said if you could rebuild, she can too." Another said, "I used to think being emotional made me weak. Now I know it's my power." Every night I'd sit on my couch, reading those letters with tears in my eyes. Because that's when I realized my revenge had turned into a revolution. One morning, during a production meeting, a younger producer said, "Ms. Price, you're basically the Beyoncé of resilience." I laughed so hard I almost choked on my coffee. "Don't gas me like that, child." He grinned. "No, really. You turned pain into equity." And that phrase stuck with me, pain into equity, because that's exactly what I did. I invested my heartbreak and built an empire. But not every moment was glamorous. Success brings new tests. Jealousy, lawsuits, fake friends trying to cash in on your peace. One former colleague tried to sue me, said I stole her business idea. We went to court. She came in with attitude, ready for a fight. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, "You want to settle?" I smiled. "No, I want the truth recorded." When it was my turn to speak, I looked right at the judge. "Your Honor, I didn't steal her idea. I survived mine." The courtroom went silent. Even the opposing counsel dropped their pen. Case dismissed. After that, I learned a new kind of strength. Quiet legal strength. The kind that doesn't argue. It just files paperwork and wins. Months later, I hosted a foundation gala. 500 guests, full orchestra, ballroom glittering with light. We raised nearly $1 million that night. When I walked on stage, the band played my favorite song, "Ain't No Stopping Us Now." Halfway through my speech, I looked out at the crowd. Women in gowns, men clapping, cameras flashing, and for a split second, I saw her. The old Helen. Standing in the back, still in her target suit and tired eyes. She smiled at me, and I whispered to myself, "We made it." After the gala, a reporter cornered me for an interview. "Ms. Price," she said, "if you could summarize your journey in one line, what would it be?" I didn't hesitate. He said I'd be nothing without him. Now his paycheck signs my donations. The next morning, that quote was on every headline. Around that same time, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Ms. Price, this is Daryl's nurse." My stomach dropped. "He's fine," she said quickly. "Just asked if you'd visit. He's at Mercy General." I froze. It had been years. But I heard something fragile in her tone. "Tell him I'll think about it," I said. For 3 days, I did think about it. Then I went. When I walked into the hospital room, Daryl was thinner, older, eyes softer. He smiled faintly. "Didn't think you'd come." I almost didn't. "I know." He coughed. "They say stress caught up with me." "Life usually does," I said quietly. He looked at me a long time. "You did good, Helen." "Thank you." "Better than good," he added. "You changed the world." I shook my head. "I just changed my choices." We sat in silence, the peaceful kind. Then he said, "You ever regret us?" I smiled. "No. Regret would mean I didn't learn." Before I left, he reached for my hand. "Tell your story as long as you can," he said. "Somebody out there needs it." "I already do." "I know," he said softly. "I just needed to hear it one more time." I squeezed his hand, whispered, "Take care," and walked out. Didn't look back. Didn't have to. That night, I prayed. Not for revenge, not for reward, but for release. Because forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past. It means you finally stopped auditioning for pain. Weeks later, I got another letter. Return address, Mercy General. Inside, just one sentence. "You were always the strongest woman I knew. I just wasn't man enough to say it." I folded it gently, placed it inside my journal, and wrote underneath, "Strength speaks last." Then I closed the book and smiled. After Daryl's letter, something in me softened, but not the kind of softness that makes you weak. It was the kind that makes you whole. Because forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just stops it from happening inside you every day. Life got quieter after that. The show was still going strong, the foundation was expanding, and my name started showing up in rooms I never even knew existed. But the noise, the rush to prove, to outperform, to outshine, it finally faded. I started waking up without panic. No need to check emails before sunrise. No more scrolling through numbers to measure my worth. Just breathing, existing, grateful. One evening, I was sitting on my balcony, city lights shimmering like promises, when Keisha called. Girl, guess who just got nominated for an NAACP Image Award? I laughed. Don't play with me. I'm not you, Best Inspirational Series. I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips. You lying, she screamed. Check your email. I did, and there it was. Congratulations, Ms. Helen Price, nominee for Outstanding Host in a Reality or News Information Series. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Then I whispered, Mama, you see this? Award night was something out of a dream. Flashing cameras, velvet gowns, and faces I used to only see on TV. Keisha stood beside me, adjusting my hair. Auntie, you better give them that Holy Ghost glow. I laughed. You mean peace and concealer? When they called my name as the winner, I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there, remembering every night I prayed for something to change. Every tear, every doubt, every quiet victory. Then it hit me all at once. I walked to the stage and said, to every woman who was told she's too emotional to lead, keep feeling everything, because emotion built this moment, and this award belongs to every one of you. The crowd stood up. Some clapped, some cried, and for the first time, I didn't shrink from the spotlight. I let it shine. After the ceremony, I went home, still in my gown, heels in hand. I didn't even turn on the lights, just sat on the couch and looked at the trophy. It wasn't made of gold. It was made of truth. I whispered, see, Daryl, you were wrong. I was never nothing without you. I just hadn't become everything I was yet. Weeks later, I visited the old office building. Yes, that one. The one I bought. They were doing renovations, and I had to approve the new design plans. As I walked through the halls, I saw a new receptionist. Young, maybe mid-20s, eyes bright but tired. She said, Ms. Price, I just wanted to say thank you. I watched your story before my interview. Gave me courage to apply. I smiled. You earned your seat, baby. Just don't let anybody convince you to give it away. She nodded, eyes shining. When I left the building, I looked up at the top floor where Daryl used to work. The windows reflected the sunset like glass fire. I whispered, full circle. That night, I called Keisha. Pack a bag, I said. For what? We going to Paris. She screamed so loud my phone cracked. Why Paris? Because we earned joy, and I'm tired of waiting for permission to enjoy it. We went. The flight was long, but the laughter was longer. We ate croissants bigger than our hands, walked along the Seine, danced under streetlights with strangers. At one point, a woman selling roses asked, Madame, you buy for love? I smiled. No, I buy for peace. She tilted her head. Peace is better than love. I nodded. Sometimes it's the same thing. Back at the hotel, I wrote in my journal, peace doesn't mean life got easier. It means I finally stopped fighting battles I'd already won. And that became my next book title, Already Won. When the book dropped, it hit #1 on the nonfiction charts within a week. Readers said it felt like therapy, in print. My favorite review read, this book didn't tell me to move on, it taught me how to move through. That line made me tear up, because that's exactly what I wanted people to feel. Not that revenge was the answer, but that healing was the higher form of victory. One afternoon during a signing in Atlanta, a teenage girl came up to me. She had braces, trembling hands, and a notebook clutched to her chest. She said, my mama used to cry every night. Then she started watching your show. Now she's laughing again. I want to write stories like you when I grow up. I leaned down, signed her book, and whispered, don't wait till you grow up. Start now. She nodded, eyes wide with belief. When she walked away, Keisha said, you realize you just planted another Helen? I smiled. Good. The world could use a few more. That night, I sat in bed flipping through old photos. Me and Daryl smiling, me at my first office, me on set, me with the foundation kids. It was strange. Every photo told a story of who I was before peace, but one stood out. Me in that kitchen, coffee mug in hand, the morning after the fight that started it all. I looked tired, small, but determined. I whispered to the photo, "You were right to stay quiet. You were just collecting proof." Sometimes I still get messages from women asking, "How do you know when you've healed?" And I tell them, "You'll know you've healed when you can tell your story without trembling." A year after the book release, I got an invitation to speak at Essence Fest. They wanted me to close the weekend with a keynote. I stood on that stage in front of 20,000 women and said, "My husband once told me I'd be nothing without him. But maybe what he meant was I needed to lose him to find me. And maybe that's not heartbreak. Maybe that's harvest." The crowd exploded. Chants of "Anti-Helen" filled the arena. I laughed, tears streaming. Because somehow this story that started in heartbreak had become a hymn. Later that night, Keisha said, "You ever think about dating again?" I smiled. "Maybe one day, but for now, I'm dating my peace." She grinned. "He treating you good?" "Better than anyone ever did." We clinked glasses and laughed until sunrise. By the time my story came full circle, peace had stopped being something I chased. It became the way I walked. The noise was gone. No battles left to fight, no ghosts left to impress. Just purpose, rhythm, and grace. A year after Already Won hit #1, I got a letter from a publishing house in London. They wanted to translate my book into 7 languages. "Women everywhere are resonating," the editor wrote. "Your voice has become universal." I read that sentence twice, whispered, "Look at God," and smiled, because somewhere between heartbreak and healing, my little story about survival had crossed oceans, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from my past. I was standing on it. I started traveling, not for business, but for balance. Ghana, Paris, Toronto, Jamaica. Everywhere I went, I met women who recognized me, not because of fame, but because of familiar pain. One woman in Accra hugged me so tight I could feel her heartbeat. She said, "My husband told me the same words yours did. Now I run a school. You taught me silence ain't surrender." I held her hand and said, "You taught yourself. I just told my truth out loud." Back home, I moved into a new house. Smaller, quieter, full of light. No luxury labels on the walls, just peace and plants. I named it Grace House. Every room smelled like lemon candles and lavender, my therapy scents. Keisha said, "You got the whole place smelling like forgiveness." I laughed. That's the goal. One Sunday, I hosted dinner for a few close friends, women who'd been with me since the storm. Keisha, Pastor Denise, my cousin Jackie, and even my old boss, Marlene, who once told me I wasn't a fit for management. Marlene raised her glass halfway through dessert. "You proved me wrong, Helen." I smiled. "No, you proved me right." Everyone laughed, but there was truth in it, because sometimes your haters are just confused investors in your future. After dinner, I stepped out onto the porch alone. The air was warm, heavy with jasmine and memory. I closed my eyes and listened. Crickets, soft wind, laughter echoing from inside. It hit me then. This was the sound of freedom. Not applause, not revenge, just enough. Later that night, I checked my phone and saw a notification from the Women Who Rose page. A new comment on one of my oldest clips. The one that started it all. It read, "I just left my marriage tonight. I'm scared, but watching you made me believe I'll be okay. Thank you for existing." I put the phone down, tears in my eyes. Then I whispered, "That's the only award I'll ever need." The next morning, I drove past the building one last time. My building, his old building, the one that used to represent every insult, every "you can't." Now it was just real estate. Nothing emotional, nothing painful, just an address that happened to belong to me. I parked outside, rolled down the window, and let the sunlight pour in. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one crying over cold coffee, afraid to dream too loud. And I said out loud, "You made it, baby. You really did." A text buzzed on my phone. It was Keisha. "Interviewers want your final message for the season finale. You want me to send something you wrote before? I typed back, no, I'll write something new. I sat there a while, letting the moment breathe. Then I opened my notes app and began typing, to every woman watching, the day they stop believing in you, don't fight them. Let them underestimate you. Because quiet women build loud miracles. Because peace pays better than revenge. And because you are already everything they said you couldn't be. That became the closing monologue of the final Women Who Rose episode. When it aired, viewers flooded the comments with fire emojis, crying faces, and testimonies. Some said, "This healed me." Others wrote, "I'm finally leaving." But one said something that stopped me cold. She didn't just tell stories, she gave us permission to be free. And that's when I knew my purpose wasn't storytelling, it was liberation. Months later, I got an invitation from my alma mater, the same college where I'd first studied communications, back when Daryl used to help with my homework and take all the credit. They wanted me to deliver the commencement speech. I said yes without hesitation. When the day came, I stood before a sea of caps and gowns. I could see myself in every young woman in that audience, full of dreams, half afraid to speak them. I took a deep breath and said, "When I was your age, someone told me I'd be nothing without him. He was wrong, because I didn't need saving. I needed time to remember who I was, and so do you." They cheered, and somewhere deep in my spirit, I felt Mama clap too. That night, I came home to Grace House, poured a glass of wine, and wrote one last entry in my journal. Revenge is temporary. Legacy is forever. I didn't just win, I outgrew the game. Then I closed the book, smiled, and looked out the window. The moon was full, glowing like forgiveness. "If you were in my shoes," I said softly to the night, "what would you have done?" I waited a moment, just long enough for silence to answer. Then I looked straight at the camera in my mind, the same invisible audience that had been with me from the start, and began said, "Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this."